Thank you guys for being here. This is like not an easy thing to come and talk about the D word. So good on you for being here. Thanks, especially the front row, the friendly faces from the Hunter. Let's talk for a second about life. What is this lifespan, isn't it, this stream? Because our lives have a span. Beginning and an end. The end usually sucks. And sometimes the beginning can also be pretty bad. But as Gloria Steinem said, the truth will set you free. But first, it will piss you off. That's, I think, what I'm going to probably do. We're going to talk about some hard stuff, but hopefully at the end with a positive take-home message. If I can get this to go, that'd be good. How do you make it go? Do you push something?
Push that.
You push that. Oh, that is excellent. All right. It's like a big fancy thing here, you guys. All right. This, of all the stuff, there's lots of stuff on this slide, but here's the bit I want to focus on. We don't talk about death enough. Despite that fact, talk louder, we are all going to die. We're going to die differently. Some of you guys might have seen, have you guys seen these trajectories before? Okay, there's been a lot of talk. Who in this room actually works right now in palliative care or aged care? Okay, a couple people, good. So this is really a common thing to see now. Up in the top left-hand side, we have the way that I think a lot of us think we're going to die. In fact, probably 1 in 10 of us will die this way, where we have an illness that takes us pretty quickly. A lot of us, about 3 out of 10 of us, will die this way. We'll have a chronic disease, COPD, or heart failure that will, each of these little dips will be a hospitalization. So a gradual decline with a couple of lowlights and then eventual death. Most of us will actually die this way on the bottom left-hand corner. So about the rest of us, which is about 6 out of 10 of us, will actually die this way. What's the problem with that? We all know we're going to die. That's okay. But most of us will die after quite a long process, and about half of us won't be able to express our preferences towards the end of our death due to disability. And so that leads to a situation, and many of us have done our hospital stint, and we've all either professionally or personally experienced good deaths and not so good, hard, bad deaths, where family members maybe weren't aware of what the person's preference were, or it wasn't agreed or communicated well between the clinicians or the family. So here's the thing. People want to talk about this stuff. If you ask them, they're not afraid to talk about it. It's just that we, the clinicians, we're not so good. So there's a gap between what people say they want to have these conversations, and what's actually happening. Part of that is because illness trajectories, it is a bit unpredictable sometimes. Also, sometimes people's healthcare needs are kind of complicated, so there's not really one clinician who feels, responsible for having that conversation. But mostly, I think, this is the real crux of the matter. We find it really hard to talk about, so we don't. And so there's a lack of knowledge then about people's values. Now, just don't take my word for it. There's a good article published in the Medical Journal of Australia that talked about what's happening, the state of play. And healthcare encounters the idea that cure is improbable or impossible, or that continued life support is inappropriate or even unkind. There's this idea in healthcare we have to do everything for everyone all the time. And not doing that is not acceptable to a lot of people, because that's where we've come to in medicine and healthcare. But the wider problem here is acknowledgement of the inevitability of death and the preparation for it have largely lost their place in our culture. We've removed sort of the art and the process of dying from public, In old houses, somebody was telling me a story a little while back where in the UK they were the midwife and they were the funeral parlor, and people would have a sitting room, and people had a lot more contact with death than we do today. And medicine is so good. The stuff that we can do, the way that people survive cancer, and other diseases, people are around for a lot longer. Some of you may have seen this report that was recently put out by the, how do you say it? Grattan Institute, the right pronunciation. Really good, it's a good read, actually, that report that talks about, and just really reinforces this idea that preparation for death has become very technical. So that's my case, That's what I'm here to talk about. It's hard, and we're not doing it very well. And then now, the part about the truth will set you free, there are some tools that are available out there to help us to have these conversations. 100 years ago, people didn't live as long, and they died pretty quick. Now, it's not that way. We're going to have a long time to think about it, and a long time to talk about it, and a long time to plan. So an opportunity. Again, I think one of the main issues around lack of advanced care planning is this lack of knowledge and competency on the behalf of us as clinicians. And interestingly, there is a suggestion that patients, families, and the wider society are more eager for these conversations than we are. So Peter Saul, who's an intensivist in Newcastle, where I work, he did a great TED Talk. It's really worth a look, where he said, maybe what we need is Occupy Death movement. You know how there was like Occupy Wall Street? Occupy Death, where, we could, I don't think it would work. But, we need some kind of a way to get people, again, familiar. And the reason, why do we want to start thinking more? Why? And I think why there's a role for nurses who work in primary care to be more engaged in just encouraging these conversations to happen is because this is not about euthanasia. This is not about curtailing, the advancement of technology in healthcare. But it matters how people die. So Cicely Saunders, who founded the hospice movement, she made this quote, which I felt is what we do, right? We walk with people. So, many people, mostly us, the children of our parents or the sibling, we don't want to talk about it, and so we don't know what people want. And then people have this burden of not knowing or concern at the end that they're going to make the wrong choice. So plan ahead, get started. So that's why the name of my talk is Let's Start Talking. Tricky conversations. Here's the question I want you to start to ask people, particularly if you're doing like your over 75 health assessment. In the event you became too sick to speak for yourself, who would you like to speak for you? So if you walk away from today with the one thing I'm going to do, that's the one thing I want you to do. The next question, have you told them? Have you spoken with them? Now, there's a whole other process that we'll talk about really quickly about whether they need to write it down or not, but it has to start with the conversations, yeah? The Hunter New England Health have set up a patient info website. There's so many websites, aren't there, out there now? It just does your head in, but this, I have to say, coming from the Hunter, this is a particularly good one, and it's based on the health pathways, which has been a combined effort between Hunter New England Health and the primary care. The GPs have come together to look at clinical kind of pathways. So this is the accompaniment to that is all kinds of patient information, and we've got on there a patient information section on advanced care planning, and all this talks about is how to have the conversation. This is one of many websites, which I'm going to show you a couple more links to websites, that can help you. Even if all you do is say, have you had that conversation with anybody? Who would you want to make decisions for you? And here's a great website that you can use. You can print off resources from this website, too, that can help. Because the main thing is you want to make sure, you kind of want to encourage people to have that appointed and enduring guardian. That's the legal term around who you choose to make. So when you go to the hospital, and the doctors are going to choose from their legal hierarchy, who's over there, they're going to ask them, what do you think should happen? If the patient wants to retain that control over who's going to make decisions on their behalf, they have to have an appointed and enduring guardian. Now, so once you've identified who you'd want to speak for you, what do you talk to them about? Mostly what I think we need to encourage people to talk about is values. And here's links to, because you can't, the whole stuff about do not resuscitate orders and all that, people don't really know if they want intubation or maybe not intubation. It kind of depends, doesn't it, on the scenario that you can't predict. So really it's about values, okay? And here's some links to values, but let me just show you a few of the resources. This is one of the values clarification tools that you can find on one of the websites, where it's like, I would find life like this to be acceptable, difficult, but bearable. So people can't necessarily, they don't want to lock into a specific, I want this, I don't want that, because how can you know? And you couldn't go through every possible scenario. So it's about having these values exercise, conversations about what you value, what's important to you, what would be important to you. Do you like a bath or a shower? Do you like your tea with milk or sugar? Everything about caring for a person is about knowing what's important to them, what they like, what they value. This is the same. So there's these great tools to have conversations, stuff that you would never think to ask. In the U.S., they started a big international campaign to get people having end-of-life conversations called the Conversation Project. Great website, kind of American, but, you can adjust it. It's fantastic. And it's got things like this. Like as a patient, you would know, you'd be able to answer these questions. I want to only know the basics. I want to know as much as I can. And once you know where people sit, who you care about on these kind of values-based things, you can really help to support them in the way that's best for them. Another one? There's tons of them. There's so many of these kind of websites. So I guess I'm not going to say that there's not one that works. There's all these different links. Have a look at them. There's even if people are more interested in, if people want to do values stuff, there's those websites. If people want to do legal information, what's a will? How many people in Australia do you think have a will who die? 50%. How many have appointed an enduring guardian? 30%. How many have an advanced care plan? 10%. Right? So like there's what you want to do with your stuff, who you want to speak for you, and really how you want the end of your life to look. It's important stuff. So there's all kinds of stuff that people can talk about. And for your patients, just opening up the door about, have you appointed someone to speak for you? Have you had a conversation with them? Can open doors. You'd be surprised. Thanks. I'll be well and truly done. Because, I can't keep these people from lunch. There's lots of stuff. So having that, just opening the door with that one question might lead to other, I'd like information about wills, I'd like information about organ donor, I'd like information about how do I make a funeral plan, And now, so just having a little stash of resources, links to different websites where you can say, and all these websites have brochures that you can download and that kind of stuff. But I just hope to go away. I just want to recommend this book to you. Atul, anybody read any of Atul Gawande's books? He wrote the Checklist Manifesto and a bunch of different books. He's a clinician, he's a doctor at Brigham and Women's in Boston, and he's done a lot about quality improvement in healthcare. He's written this book, and actually he's going to be at the Sydney's Writer Festival, but it's all sold out, but he's going to be there. He wrote this fabulous book, if you're interested in this, about, just getting more comfortable about talking about end of life. He's written a book, and this is kind of his take-home messages, asking patients, for us as practice nurses who are walking beside our patients on their journey through life, from birth to death, and then the grandkids, we're just there for all of it. What we want to really understand when we're talking to patients, and you're looking at them and you're thinking in your head, would I be surprised if this patient was not here in 12 months? That's the question that the researchers all use, to kind of, what? You're pretty good at figuring it out. Like, it's not that hard to figure out, is it? You know if a patient's not likely to be there. What that should trigger in your head, what do I need to know? What do they understand? What does my patient understand about where they're at in their illness? I know they might be dying because I've seen it and I'm a clinician. Do they know? Not to say that's your job to go, did you know you were dying? Nah. Where are you at? Where are you up to? What's your understanding of where you're at with your illness, Do you have any fears or worries for the future? goals and priorities. And I mean, just opening the door, it's about like sex, I guess, you know? As soon as you start talking to it and normalizing it, you are surprised at how much. And I guess the over 75 health assessment is the place where we have the space to have those conversations. Okay. Anyway, highly recommend the book. My hope is that we can start to think of, I want us as nurses and as patient advocates to advocate for our patients to kind of take death back the way we took birth back. You know, how birth became a very medicalized, controlled thing, and then sort of consumers took it back. Well, I'm hoping that's the kind of thing that's going to happen with dying, that in a similar way, you know, the experience can be so much more positive and so much more patient-centered if we start to empower patients with information and with conversations. Thanks.